The laughter from the hallway shouldn't have stung like it did. I swear, if I have to eat that stuff at the wedding, I'll die, my own daughter Lindsay said, her voice sharp and clear behind the cracked door. It's like prison food. Who still makes gelatin salad in 2025? I stood there frozen, holding a tray of my deviled eggs, the ones she used to beg for at church potlucks. Brad, her fiancé, snorted. Just tell her it's a no. She doesn't get it. This isn't some country buffet. It's a modern wedding. Then came the blow that finished me off. She's lucky we're even inviting her. I should have dropped the tray right there, let the eggs splatter across the tile floor like my pride just had. But I didn't. I smiled, tight-lipped, the way you do when your heart's crumbling and there's no time to collect the pieces. I walked into that dining room, set the tray down like nothing had happened, and said, "Y'all better grab one before Clara eats 'em all." Nobody suspected a thing. Except maybe Clara. She glanced up from her seat, eyes narrowing, catching the tremble in my hand as I poured sweet tea. She knew. Of course she knew. We'd worked side by side in the school cafeteria for over 20 years. You learn to read a woman by the way she slices pie when she's angry. I sat through that whole Sunday dinner with a smile that hurt my face. Listened to Lindsay gush about her wedding colors, dusty rose and cream, nothing like the vibrant yellows and reds I once taught her to love. Brad went on about the venue he wanted to book in Charleston, how it needed to elevate the brand of their relationship. I swallowed my sweet tea and my shame. I had planned to surprise them today. I was going to write the check. $40,000 I'd tucked away for 2 decades. Catering, dress, honeymoon, whatever they needed. I didn't grow up with much, but I knew the joy of giving your child a leg up. I wanted Lindsay to have what I never did. But now I realized I was just the hired help. The cook. The old woman they had to tolerate for appearance's sake. And I'll be damned if I'd pay for my own humiliation. After dessert, my famous hummingbird cake, which everyone devoured without a word of thanks, I washed the dishes by hand like I always did. Lindsay disappeared into the living room. Brad wandered out to the porch to smoke. Clara lingered beside me, drying the plates. "You all right, sugar?" she asked quietly. I nodded. "Fine." "Liar," she said, setting down the towel and wrapping her arms around me. Her hug smelled like ivory soap and menthol rub. Familiar. Anchoring. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, hands in my lap, listening to the old clock tick. I didn't cry. Not one tear. I'd cried enough for this girl over the years. Every scraped knee, every breakup, every time she came home from college with puffy eyes and a backpack full of laundry. But this time I felt something different. Not sadness. Not even anger. Resolve. They wanted modern? Well, I could be modern too. I took out my checkbook, the one I'd hidden in the flour tin, and wrote a big void across the check I'd already made out to her. Then, I tucked it in a new envelope, scribbled one word across the front. No. That envelope went back in the tin, right under the sack of King Arthur flour. They wouldn't see it coming, and I wouldn't say a word. Let them plan their Pinterest-perfect wedding with someone else's money. I won't serve prison food. And I sure as hell won't be treated like an inmate. They think they've silenced me, but they've only awakened something I forgot I still had. Dignity. The next morning, I pulled down the old tin box from the top shelf of the pantry. The one with Warren's recipes, written in faded blue Sharpie, crooked from my husband's left-handed scrawl. That man couldn't fold a dish towel to save his life, but he sure could fry catfish that'd make you slap your mama. I set the box on the kitchen table like I was handling a sacred relic. And in a way, I was. Inside were cards worn soft at the edges, smudged with grease and chocolate and life. Chicken and dumplings, Mama's way, Warren's mustard greens. Edna's cornbread, do not mess with. His handwriting. My notes, our kitchen legacy. I hadn't touched the box in years. Not since he passed. I guess because cooking without him always felt like singing harmony by myself. But that morning, I needed to remember who I was, who we were. Back when Lindsay was little, She used to sit right on that counter, bare feet dangling, hair in sponge curlers, watching us cook for the church revival. "Don't forget the hot sauce, Daddy," she'd squeal, and Warren would wink like she was sous chef of the year. She loved our food then. Begged me to teach her how to fold biscuits so they peeled in layers. Called my cornbread yellow cake from heaven. I used to daydream about passing this box down to her. About her making Sunday dinners in her own home. Telling her babies, "This one's Grandma Edna's. Only Grandma Edna's." But that was a long time ago. Now she wants things aesthetic. She's too proud to serve collard greens, too embarrassed to admit she was raised on pickled okra and skillet gravy. Brad probably thinks gumbo is a brand of soap. I pulled out a card and ran my thumb across Warren's handwriting. "Honey barbecue drumsticks. Good for picnics or if somebody's mad," I chuckled, despite myself. He always wrote little notes like that, like he was speaking from beyond. In a way, I suppose he still was. I laid out 5 recipe cards in a fan. Just to look at them. Touch them. Remember. And something strange happened. I stopped thinking about Lindsay. I started thinking about flavor. About joy. About how these dishes had shown up after funerals, during fundraisers, at baby showers and Sunday potlucks. How people would line up around the church just to get a scoop of my butter beans. How Mrs. Fletcher once cried into my squash casserole because it tasted like being safe. My food had fed people. Not just their stomachs, but their memories, their spirits. Maybe Lindsay didn't want that anymore. But somebody did. The problem wasn't the recipes. The problem was who I'd been giving them to. I stood up, took a deep breath, and opened the kitchen window just a crack. The scent of my garden, damp earth, tomatoes on the vine, and basil, drifted in like a reminder. "You're still here." I dusted off the outside of the box, ran a clean dish towel across the top. Then I grabbed a fresh card. "Peach cobbler, shelter batch," I wrote at the top. Big and clear. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet. But for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for Lindsay to ask. 3 days passed before the phone finally rang. I was folding dish towels in the laundry room, one of those quiet tasks where your hands move, but your mind wanders. When I saw her name on the screen, Lindsay Bouquet, I almost didn't answer. That little flower emoji next to her name used to make me smile. Now it just looked like something wilting. "Hi, Mama," she chirped. That tone. Sweet as syrup but thin as air. She always laid it on thick when she wanted something. I used to fall for it every time. Not anymore. "Afternoon," I said, plain and cool. I just wanted to check in. "See how you're doing." I waited a beat. No one ever calls just to check anymore. Not really. There's always a "by the way" coming right behind it. She didn't even make it 15 seconds. So Brad and I found this amazing venue outside Charleston. They only have one Saturday left this fall. It's perfect. I mean, it's a little over budget, but worth it. "MMHMM," I said. Silence. I could hear her blinking. "So I was wondering if you've had a chance to send the check. We need to put down the deposit this week." There it was. That "we" again. "We found it. We love it. We need you to pay for it." I walked to the sink and poured myself a glass of water. Took my time sipping it. "I've been reconsidering the budget," I said finally. More silence. Sharper this time. "Oh, okay. Well, is everything all right?" "Peachy," I replied. "I've just been thinking a lot about what matters lately. What's worth investing in?" She gave a little nervous laugh. "You make it sound like we're a stock portfolio." I didn't laugh with her. Then she sighed. That theatrical kind of sigh she used to do as a teenager when I wouldn't let her out in a crop top. Some habits never die, they just dress better. "I mean, you said, months ago, that you were saving this for the wedding." "I was," I said. 20 years now." She jumped in like she'd scored a point. "Exactly. So what changed?" A pause. I could have told her right then. I could have said, "You did." Or "You and your fiancé with his boutique attitude and no manners." I could have repeated her exact words. "I'm not serving prison food at my wedding." But I didn't. Because see, you don't hand people like that your heartbreak on a silver platter. They'd only season it with ego and serve it back to you cold. So instead, I said, just feels like time to reevaluate where love's being returned. She was quiet again, but I could hear her chewing on that sentence. Mama, if this is about Sunday, I didn't say it was, but if something's bothering you, I'd rather we talk about it. I stared out the window. My marigolds were blooming. Bright, stubborn little things. Well, I said softly, I suppose if something was bothering me, I'd want to see if anyone noticed before I had to spell it out. Another beat of silence. She didn't notice. Not really. Oh, she said. Okay, well just let me know, I guess. We hung up soon after. She never once asked how I was feeling, didn't mention the dinner, didn't say thank you for the deviled eggs, or the cake, or the sweet tea I'd poured, while holding back tears. She just wanted the check. And I, finally, saw it for what it was. It wasn't a conversation. It was a transaction. And I wasn't their mother. I was a bank account with a biscuit recipe. Well, accounts close, and recipes get rewritten. Clara picked me up early Saturday morning, just like she used to when we both worked at the elementary school cafeteria. Same old pickup truck, same old travel mug of black coffee, same gospel music humming low from the radio. You bring the beans? She asked, eyes twinkling. Of course, I said, patting the covered pot on my lap. Slow cooked all night with ham hocks. Ain't nobody leaving hungry today. The shelter was a brick building tucked behind the Baptist church, easy to miss unless you were looking. Pastor Glenn met us at the back entrance with that warm, sleepy smile of his, sleeves rolled up, apron already on. I'd only met him a few times before, mainly through church functions, but his presence always felt, still, like a good porch in a storm. We're honored to have you, Miss Edna, he said, taking the pot from my hands like it was a treasure. I hadn't stepped foot in a kitchen like that in years. Stainless steel counters, squeaky tile floor, the smell of onions and yeast and something sweeter, maybe banana bread, baking in the oven. It didn't smell like sadness. It smelled like someone still believed in hope. Let me know where you need me, I told Clara, tying my apron. We fell into rhythm fast, just like old times. Clara on cornbread duty, me ladling beans into rows of waiting bowls. A few younger volunteers stirred mac and cheese or wiped down trays. Nobody was in charge, but everybody moved like they belonged. No showboating, no condescension. The line started forming by 10:30. Women and children mostly, a few older men. Quiet voices, tired eyes. Some smiled, some didn't. But when those beans hit the air, hot, smoky, thick with flavor, people started lifting their heads. A little girl with beads in her braids tugged at her mama's sleeve. It smells like Thanksgiving, she whispered. Clara winked at me. Told you. As I served, I looked into each face. I offered seconds without being asked, poured extra sweet tea for the tired mamas, slid warm rolls onto plates with a smile. No one complained. No one asked what brand of linen would be used at their wedding reception. They just said thank you. Over and over. God bless you, miss. You cooked this? For us? I haven't tasted beans like this since my granny passed. And then, halfway through the line, a woman with sunken cheeks and shaking hands sat down with her bowl and started crying. Not loud, just a soft tremble in her shoulders as she took a bite and covered her mouth like she didn't want anyone to see. Pastor Glenn noticed too. He walked over, sat beside her without saying a word, and handed her a napkin. She wiped her eyes. It tastes like before everything went wrong. Clara nudged me. You hearing this? I was. Every word. After the last plate was served and the trays cleared, Pastor Glenn came over, leaned against the counter, arms crossed like he was settling in for something real. You don't cook like that unless you've known some kind of sorrow, he said. I met his eyes. And you don't recognize it unless you've walked through it. He smiled. Then I reckon we're both qualified. That afternoon, as Clara drove me home, the sun spilled gold across the road. My hands smelled like garlic and flour and smoked paprika. I forgot what this feels like, I said. What's that? She asked. Feeding people who don't expect it, who see it as a blessing, not a right. Clara gave a slow nod. They reminded you who you are, didn't they? I looked out the window. My vegetable garden was just coming into view, okra reaching for the sun, tomatoes swelling with promise. They did, I whispered. And who I'm not. Because I am not a woman who gives everything to people who see her as nothing. I am not a wallet wrapped in an apron. And come what may, I am not done. I wasn't even supposed to go to the dress fitting. Lindsay had mentioned it in passing the week before. Oh, we're going to try on dresses Saturday. Nothing big. But when I asked if she wanted me to come, she paused for half a beat too long before saying, well, sure, if you want. That pause told me everything. But I went anyway. I wore my Sunday best. A pale blue blouse Warren always said brought out my eyes, my nicest slacks, and a little scarf I tied at the neck for flair. I even wore the brooch Lindsay gave me for Mother's Day when she was 14, back when she still believed I was someone to admire. The boutique was downtown, all white brick and pink lettering, the kind of place that offers you champagne just for walking in. I stepped inside and was greeted by cold air and a receptionist with lashes like windshield wipers. Brad was already there, lounging on a velvet love seat like he owned the building, wearing sunglasses indoors. Lord help me. Hey, he said, drawing out the syllable like I was a stray cat he didn't particularly want on the porch. Morning, Brad, I replied, setting my purse down gently. Lindsay appeared from the fitting room in a mermaid-style gown that looked like it had been poured on with a ladle. It was elegant, sure, but it didn't look like her. Not the girl who used to dance barefoot in the backyard, or the teenager who swore she'd get married in boots and sunflowers. This girl was stiff, buttoned up, nervous, like she was being edited. What do you think? She asked. It's beautiful, I said carefully. But are you comfortable in it? She waved her hand like swatting off a fly. It's the aesthetic we're going for. Aesthetic. That word again. Brad leaned over to her and whispered something. I couldn't hear all of it, but I caught enough. She's too country for our aesthetic. My hands curled around the strap of my purse. I didn't say a word. Didn't blink. Lindsay didn't defend me. She didn't even look over. Another dress. And another. I sat through each one, offering soft comments, steering clear of anything that could be twisted. Every time I tried to be kind, Brad made a face. And Lindsay? She giggled like a teenager with a crush. At one point, the stylist, bless her polite heart, turned to me and said, Are you the mother of the bride? Lindsay cut in before I could answer. Yes, but she's not paying for the dress. Brad and I are covering that part. I smiled at the stylist. I'm just here for the memories. But let me tell you something, friend. That moment right there, that clipped correction, that need to draw a line, made something inside me shift, not break, not snap, shift, like a door closing with quiet finality. When we left the boutique, I trailed a few paces behind them on the sidewalk. They walked ahead, like a couple from a magazine, all polish and performance. I looked down at my sensible shoes, the ones I'd worn every Thanksgiving, every graduation, every doctor's visit with Lindsay, the ones that had stood in her corner longer than any man ever had. And I realized she didn't see me anymore. Not really, not unless she needed something. I could have spoken up. I could have said, Don't talk about me like I'm some hayseed in a grocery store wedding dress. I could have cried, made a scene, demanded better. But I didn't. Because here's the truth, no one likes to say out loud. When you realize you've been replaced, not just set aside, but replaced, there's no sense in fighting for a seat at a table where you're only being tolerated. You leave. Not loudly, not dramatically. You just stop bringing your best casserole. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not for lack of trying. I did my usual routine. Brushed my teeth, warmed some milk, turned down the quilt Warren's mama made us when we married. But the sleep just wouldn't come. Too many words rattling around inside me. Too many things unsaid. So I pulled out the old notebook from the back of the junk drawer. The one with the creased cover and the little magnolia sticker Clara gave me after Warren died. I hadn't written in it in years, but that night I needed something more than my own thoughts bouncing off the walls. I sat down at the kitchen table, just me, the notebook, and the steady tick of the wall clock. And I started writing, "Things I did for Lindsay." That's what I titled the page. And Lord, once I started, the memories poured out faster than I could catch them. Worked a double shift to afford her ballet shoes. Skipped my anniversary trip with Warren to chaperone her school field trip. Sold my class ring to cover her freshman dorm deposit. Spent 2 months eating beans and rice so she could have a designer prom dress. Let her move back home after college with her boyfriend and never asked for rent. I paused after that one, drew a little line underneath it, like I needed to take a breath. Then I kept going. Babysat during flu season. Even when my own arthritis was flaring. Never missed a birthday, never once. Put away money every Christmas, even the lean years, for her wedding fund. I looked down at the list and thought, if I handed this to a stranger, they'd think Lindsay adored me, cherished me. But all that giving, all that folding myself smaller and smaller to fit into her changing life, it hadn't made me loved. It had made me expected. And that's the trick of it, isn't it? Once kindness becomes routine, it stops being seen as a gift. It turns into a job. I flipped to a fresh page, wrote in big letters, what they call prison food. Underneath, I listed out the recipe for my sweet potato casserole, word for word, just like Warren used to dictate it. 6 sweet potatoes, peeled and boiled, 1/2 stick of butter, dash of cinnamon, heavy pour of love. I wrote it exactly like that. No measurements, just feeling. Then I added a line beneath it. They don't feed you in prison with this much love. I sat back in the chair and stared at those words. They looked different in ink, more permanent, more powerful than they'd sounded in my head. The house was silent around me, not even the hum of the fridge, just stillness. I closed the notebook and laid my hand over it like a Bible. I wasn't crying, I wasn't raging, I was remembering. Remembering me, because somewhere between Lindsay's wedding plans and Brad's smug whispers and all the years I'd spent giving without question, I'd lost her, yes, but I'd lost me first. Well, not anymore. The invitation came on heavy cardstock with gold foil lettering, real fancy. Please join us for an evening of celebration honoring Lindsay and Brad's engagement. Black tie optional. I almost didn't go. But then I remembered, sometimes you need to show up just once more to make sure you never show up again. So I put on my navy dress, the one with the lace collar Warren used to say made me look like church royalty. I wore my pearls, the real ones, the ones Lindsay had once asked to borrow and then forgot to return for 6 months. When I arrived, the whole house was lit up like one of those designer catalogs. String lights in the backyard, champagne flutes lined in rows. Waiters in black vests, balancing little plates of things that looked like they came from a chemistry set instead of a kitchen. Clara met me at the door, bless her. She had on a deep plum shawl, and the look of a woman who already smelled smoke before the fire. "You sure about this?" she asked. I nodded. "Just here for the hors d'oeuvre." The crowd was mostly Brad's people. Folks with thin smiles and thick wallets. Real estate types. Folks who say, when you tell them you live in a 2-bedroom. I recognized a few from Lindsay's side, but not many. Not many from mine either. Dinner was past bites. No buffet, no plates, no warmth. Just cold bites and colder stares. I stayed quiet mostly, sipping ginger ale from a champagne glass like I belonged. Clara made small talk while I watched Lindsay glide from group to group, her laugh higher than I remembered, like she was trying to sound like someone she wasn't. Then Brad raised his glass. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" The group hushed. Cameras came out. "I just want to say how excited I am to marry this incredible woman. Lindsay, you're strong, smart, and best of all willing to leave the past behind." Lindsay laughed. Too loud, too quick. "And by past," Brad went on, "I mean things like mashed potatoes, jello salads, and casseroles with mystery ingredients. We're starting new traditions, baby." People laughed. A whole roomful. I didn't. Clara didn't either. I just sat there, still, cold, a glass of memories in my hand. He wasn't talking about food, he was talking about me. I felt my face flush, not with shame, but with clarity. The people I raised, the people I fed and folded and funded were laughing, not just behind my back this time, but around me. With that, I stood, quietly, no scene, just a gentle brush of my napkin onto the tablecloth and a polite smile to Clara. "I'm heading out," I whispered. "You want me to come with?" she asked, already moving to grab her purse. "No, sugar. I want them to see the empty chair." I walked out the front door, not looking back, past the string lights, past the valet boy who offered to fetch my car. "I'll walk," I said. And I did, all the way to the corner, where my truck was parked in the dark. As I drove home, the evening air crisp against the window, I felt something settle deep in my chest. Not sadness, not even anger. Acceptance. I wasn't part of the celebration. I was just a shadow they were trying to outrun. And now? They could run all they wanted, but they'd do it without my name on the check. She came pounding on my door 3 days later. No call, no text. Just the sound of her car tires screeching up the gravel and the slam of her heels hitting my front porch like a warning. I was already in the kitchen, kneading biscuit dough. Nothing fancy, just flour, lard, and muscle memory. Clara always said you could tell a woman's mood by how she handled her dough. That morning, mine was firm, focused. The knock turned into a bang. "Mama, open the door!" I took my time wiping my hands, then walked to the front hallway. Opened the door without a smile. Lindsay stood there, sunglasses still on, like armor. She looked furious and rattled. "We need to talk," she said. I nodded. "We can." She didn't come inside right away, just stood there, shifting like the porch boards beneath her feet might give way. Finally, she spoke. "You embarrassed me, walking out like that." I tilted my head. "Oh, honey, I didn't make Brad say what he said. I didn't write your speech for you." Her mouth tightened. "And now you're not answering my calls, not texting back. And I heard from Auntie Jean that you've been saying you're reevaluating the budget. Is that true?" I met her eyes. "It is." Her nostrils flared. "You can't just pull funding at the last minute. We already paid deposits." I folded my arms. "Oh, so now it's funding? I thought I was your mother." She didn't say anything. "I worked 40 years in hairnets and orthopedic shoes," I continued. "Packed hundreds of lunches for other people's kids so you could have braces and band camp and college. I saved every Christmas, every birthday, every skipped trip, so one day I could give you something special." My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "But I won't finance disrespect." Lindsay blinked. Her lip quivered just slightly, the way it used to when she was 5 and trying not to cry after a scraped knee. "Mama, I didn't mean for it to come out like that." I nodded slowly. "I believe you." She looked up, surprised. "I think you meant it to come out worse." That was the toned-down version. A long pause. Then the real Lindsay came out. "Okay, look, Brad says we don't need the drama. We'll just elope if we have to. But that's on you. That's your choice." I stepped back, just enough to rest my hand on the doorframe. "Do what makes you happy." Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. "You always told me I couldn't manipulate you with tears," I said softly. "Turns out, you can't manipulate me with threats either." The wind stirred a chime on the porch, a soft, clinking sound. "But you said you'd help me." "I said a lot of things," I answered, "back when I thought I mattered more to you than your aesthetic." She looked around the porch like she was searching for something to anchor her. Her eyes landed on my flower bed, petunias, blooming full in the heat. "I don't understand why you're doing this," she said finally. That made me smile, not wide, but real. "I know, baby, that's the saddest part." And then, gently, I closed the door. Didn't slam it, didn't lock it in her face. Just ended the conversation. The silence afterward was thick. I stood in the hallway for a while, hands still on the doorknob, listening to her footsteps retreat, the car door slam, the engine start. She peeled away down the street, and I stood there, still, tall, My biscuits overproofed a little that morning, but Lord, they never tasted better. It was a Tuesday morning when I pulled out the envelope. I had woken up early, before the sun crested the pecan tree out back. The house was quiet except for the creak of the floorboards and the low hum of the fridge. I made a pot of coffee, real coffee, none of that pod nonsense, and stood at the kitchen window watching dew shimmer on my collards. Then I reached into the flour tin, pulled it out. That envelope had been sitting there ever since I voided that check, the one meant for Lindsay's wedding. It was thick now, not just paper, but something more, a weight that had shifted over time. I dressed with care that morning. Slacks, button up, my cross necklace. Clara drove me into town, no questions asked. She just nodded when I told her where we were going. The shelter was already buzzing when we arrived. Volunteers unloading produce, kids running underfoot. Someone had made banana bread again. It hung in the air like a hug. Pastor Glenn met me near the kitchen door, a clipboard tucked under one arm, apron already streaked with flour. "Miss Edna," he said, smiling wide. "Back to bless us?" "Just passing through," I said, holding out the envelope. He took it slowly, reading the label in my shaky but sure handwriting. For someone starting over. He didn't ask what was in it, didn't open it in front of me, just held it with both hands like it might sprout wings. "You sure?" he asked softly. "I am." He nodded. "I'll make sure it goes where it's needed." "I know you will." We didn't hug. We didn't cry. It was simpler than that. Honest. Clara and I didn't talk much on the drive back. The air felt thick with something holy. I watched the trees blur past the window. Pine, dogwood, magnolia, and felt a deep stillness settle over me. At home, I set a pot of beans on the stove and went out to prune my tomato vines. The sky was wide and clear, the kind of blue you don't notice until you've spent too long looking down. Inside that envelope was a cashier's check, $40,000 to be exact. The same money I'd once earmarked for a wedding that had turned sour before the invitations even went out. But now, that money wasn't for a dress that would yellow in a closet. It wasn't for linen rentals or salmon croquettes on silver trays. It was for someone who needed it. A woman I might never meet. Maybe a mother with a baby on her hip and nowhere to sleep. Maybe a teenage girl trying to leave a man who hit more than he hugged. Maybe just someone who lost her way. But not her will. That check was going to change someone's story. And I didn't need to know the details. Because it was no longer about being seen. It was about doing what's right even when no one's clapping. When Clara left that afternoon, she kissed my cheek and squeezed my hand. "You feel lighter," she said. "I am lighter." Because I finally realized dignity isn't about being honored. It's about acting in honor, especially when you've been dishonored. I poured myself a glass of sweet tea and sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, painting the sky an orange in forgiveness. I didn't need applause. I had peace. Lindsay must have logged into the account around 7 p.m. I knew because my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 5 missed calls, 3 frantic texts, and a voicemail that started with "Mother" and ended with, "What the hell did you do?" I didn't listen to the rest. Instead, I set my phone on the windowsill, right next to my ceramic frog and the potted basil I'd nursed back from near death last spring. I was boiling green beans, seasoned just right, bit of salt, pinch of garlic, a little bacon grease saved from Sunday. It's funny the kind of peace you can feel when someone else is panicking and you're not. Clara was in the living room, flipping through her gardening catalog. "Is she losing her mind yet?" she asked without looking up. I smiled. "Oh, honey, it's a full spiral." The shared wedding savings account, the one Lindsay had convinced me to link years ago just for easier transfers, now reads $0. I had moved my savings legally and quietly a week prior. No warning, just a smooth transaction from one account into a cashier's check. I'd shut the door, sealed the vault, and handed the key to a cause that would never spit in my face. Brad must have found out first, judging by the second voicemail. "This is completely irresponsible, Edna. You promised us. We've already paid deposits." I nearly laughed out loud. "Promised them?" "No, sir. I promised myself that I wouldn't keep financing disrespect just to keep a seat at their table. Lindsay's texts kept coming. Where did it go? Is this a mistake? Please tell me you didn't do this to be petty. We have a caterer deposit due Friday. Oh, baby girl. You had a caterer, now you have a crisis. Brad started chiming in via group message. We can still salvage this. Tell her to wire the funds back. The entitlement burned through the screen. No, please. No understanding. Just demands. The thing is, I wasn't mad. Not anymore. What I felt was distance. Blessed, quiet, earned distance. Like I'd taken my heart out of their hands and finally placed it back where it belonged, inside my own chest. Later that night, Clara looked over at me as I set out 2 bowls of cobbler. You gonna call her back? I shook my head. What for? She's not asking questions. She's issuing orders. You think she'll show up again? Probably. You ready? I paused. Took a bite of peach and sugar and memory. I thought about all the Sundays I'd spent at that girl's side. The doctor visits. The scraped knees. The job interviews I helped her practice for. The time I took her to the ER at 2 a.m. because she swore her appendix had burst. It was gas. I looked at Clara. I'm past ready. My phone buzzed again. I picked it up this time. Not to respond, just to read. The last message from Lindsay. You're being cruel. You're punishing me for one comment. One comment? One comment is a snide remark. This was a decade of being erased one compromise at a time. And now? Now I was unavailable. And Lord, didn't that feel divine? That Sunday morning, I put on my cream blouse with the pearl buttons, the ones I save for holy days and hard choices. Clara picked me up in her truck, like always, but this time she didn't ask any questions, just looked over at me and said, You look like you're about to witness something. And I was. Church was full that morning. The air hummed with potluck perfume, baby powder, lavender lotion, and a whiff of someone's banana bread. The choir was already rehearsing, voices rising like warm bread in a low oven. We slid into our usual pew, 4th from the front on the left. I folded my hands in my lap. I wasn't nervous, just still. Pastor Glenn climbed into the pulpit, clearing his throat like he always did when something mattered. Before we begin today's message, he said, I'd like to share some news. A blessing, really. The sanctuary hushed. This week, the shelter received an anonymous donation, a generous one, enough to renovate our kitchen, restock our pantry, and cover 6 months of meals for every woman and child who walks through our doors. Gasps, murmurs, even a soft, Lord, have mercy, from Miss Annabelle in the back. I kept my eyes on my hands. Pastor Glenn continued, I don't know who gave it. I don't know what moved their heart. But I know what this means. It means no mother will have to choose between feeding her child or keeping the lights on. It means our cooks won't have to stretch beans into miracles every week. It means hope, served hot. Applause swelled through the room. A few folks stood. Clara leaned close and whispered, You sure you don't want to tell 'em? I shook my head. I already know. Because this moment, it wasn't about me. It was about the woman who cried into her soup last month. The one who hadn't tasted something warm and homemade in weeks. It was about the kids who wouldn't go to bed hungry. I looked around the room and saw Lindsay's high school English teacher, a boy I used to serve in the cafeteria now holding his daughter in his lap. I saw lives that had stretched and stumbled and survived. And for once, I didn't ache to be known. I felt full. Later, during coffee hour, the whispers floated around the fellowship hall like bees around a peach pie. Who do you think gave it? Maybe someone won the lottery. I heard it was a local businesswoman. Clara smiled into her cup. Could be, she said. Could also be someone who just got tired of being taken for granted. I didn't say a word. Lindsay wasn't there. Neither was Brad. But I imagined them at home, still scouring the account statements, still calling the bank, still looking for the money like it was lost. It wasn't lost. It was reassigned. Reassigned to someone who would never call my food prison food. Someone who wouldn't whisper insults behind a closed door while licking frosting off my cake plate. Someone who saw a hot meal not as a burden, but as a blessing. Pastor Glenn passed by on his way out and paused by our table. "Whoever gave that gift," he said, "they must have been someone with a lot of hurt and a whole lot more grace." Clara raised her cup in a quiet salute. "Amen," she said. I didn't look away. I looked right at him and smiled. Because the truth is, friend, that money fed more than just bodies. It fed my soul. She came back. But this time, she didn't knock. She pounded. It was the Tuesday after church, late in the afternoon. I was clipping deadheads off my petunias when I heard the car door slam hard enough to shake the pecan limbs. Then, "Mama, open the door. We need to talk." She wasn't using that syrup voice anymore. No sweet icing on spoiled cake. This was rage. Pure and hot and unfiltered. I didn't move. I set down my clippers and walked inside. Not fast, not slow, just steady. I closed the front door gently, turned the lock with a quiet click, and walked to the hallway table where my phone sat charging. I opened the camera, set it to record, not because I wanted revenge, but because clarity needs receipts. Outside, her voice rose. "Do you hate me now? Is that it? You're just gonna sit inside while everything falls apart out here?" I pressed record, held the phone steady in my palm. "We can't rebook the caterer without that deposit. The florist dropped us. Brad's family is livid. They think you're unstable." I smiled then, not from joy, but from confirmation. There it was, the truth. This wasn't about a wedding. It was about image, about keeping up appearances, about blaming me for the crumbling tower they built on sand. My daughter, my own flesh and blood, was on my porch calling me unstable because I stopped paying to be mistreated. Clara would have said it was almost poetic. Then came the sobbing, real, hiccuping sobs. "You don't understand, Mama. I need this wedding. Everything's falling apart. Brad won't even talk to me. He said I embarrassed him in front of his parents." I heard her slide down onto the porch swing. The chain creaked under her weight. For a second, it was quiet except for her crying. And I almost opened the door. But then I remembered something. This wasn't the first time she'd come crying. She cried when she got caught lying about where she was in high school. She cried when she wrecked my car and blamed a phantom truck. She cried when Brad didn't propose fast enough, and I suggested she reconsider him entirely. But every tear was followed by the same thing: blame, deflection, entitlement. I didn't open the door. I just sat on the floor, back against the wall, phone still recording. Not to humiliate her, but to finally bear witness to the truth. This was the consequence, not of cruelty, but of clarity. Eventually she stood. The swing stopped creaking. "You chose strangers over your own daughter," she said, voice raw now. "No, Lindsay," I whispered, even though she couldn't hear me. "I chose myself." She stomped down the porch steps, muttering something I didn't catch. The car engine turned over and peeled away in a spray of gravel. I sat there a while longer, phone warm in my hand. Then I stood, made myself a cup of tea, sat on the porch swing where her weight had just been. It was still warm, but fading. Like her voice, like the fantasy of who I thought she'd grow into. It was 2 weeks later, when the engagement unraveled for good. I was out in the garden, thinning the carrots, when Clara pulled up, window down and eyes wide, with the kind of gleeful restraint only a best friend can deliver. "You seen it yet?" she asked. "Seen what?" She waved her phone. "Brad changed his relationship status this morning. Single." I raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't always mean what it means," she grinned. "Keep reading." Clara handed me the phone. A screenshot of Brad's latest Instagram story popped up. A picture of him on a rooftop, with some generic-looking blonde, and the caption, "Surround yourself with peace, not pettiness." He tagged no one, but everyone knew who he meant. And just like that, the house of cards fell. It didn't take long before the texts started. "Lindsay first. He left. Just like that. Said he doesn't want to marry into a legacy of petty women. You happy now? You ruined my life." I stared at that last one. "You ruined my life. Not he broke my heart." Not "I should have seen it coming." Not "I'm scared, mama." Just blame. Always blame. I sat down at the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of tea, let the message sit there on my screen like an accusation scratched into a bathroom stall. I thought about everything I could say back. You chose him over me. You mocked your raising. You looked me in the eye and still decided I was disposable. But I didn't say any of that. I didn't need to. Instead, I wrote just one line: "You'll survive." And I meant it. Because she would. Just like I had. Through loss, through loneliness, through that slow, aching wake-up call that comes when the person you loved never truly saw you. She'd survive, but she'd have to do it without my applause, without my checkbook, without my casseroles cooling on the front seat of her car. Clara came inside while I was rinsing tomatoes. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm more than okay." Because the truth is, I hadn't felt this steady in years. Lindsay wasn't a child anymore, and I wasn't her crutch. Brad? He'd done me a favor. Exposed what was hiding in plain sight. You can't build a marriage or a family on polished lies. Eventually, the shine fades. And what's underneath? Well, sometimes it's just rot. Later that night, I added a line to my journal. Sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do for someone determined to fall. Then I closed the book, and I slept, peacefully. They say small towns never forget a kindness. Turns out, they don't forget a scandal either. But every now and then, something happens that makes folks put their gossip down and stand on their feet. That's what happened the night of the Heart of the Town award. I didn't even know I was being honored until Clara showed up on my porch with a garment bag and a smirk. "You've got about 2 hours to put this on and fix your hair. And don't fight me, it's already been announced." I blinked. "Announced where?" She handed me a flyer. "Community night at Fairview Hall, honoring local heroes, guest of honor, a woman who fed us all and never asked for applause." I looked up at her, suspicious. "You had something to do with this?" She grinned. "Me? I just made a few phone calls, maybe dropped a few hints." I started to protest, but Clara held up a finger. "This isn't about you. It's about us. About what you gave, without needing your name in lights. Let us give something back." So I put on the dress. Navy blue with a gold pin at the collar. Pearls, again. Simple shoes. Hair curled soft at the edges. Fairview Hall was full to the rafters. Folding chairs, standing room only. I saw people I hadn't seen in years. Old lunch ladies from the school. Boys I used to feed 3 times a week, now grown with kids of their own. Pastor Glenn stood off to the side, arms crossed, beaming. Then Clara took the mic. She didn't read from a script, she just spoke. "Tonight, we're here for someone who never asked to be celebrated. A woman whose food fed more than stomachs. It fed dignity. When I worked beside her in the school kitchen, I saw it every day. She knew which kid didn't get breakfast. She snuck extra rolls in their bags. She made casseroles stretch farther than science should allow. And when she had the chance to spend her hard-earned savings on something pretty and polite, she chose instead to feed strangers." A hush fell over the room. "She gave $40,000 to the women's shelter. Quietly, anonymously. Because she knew what it meant to go unseen, to give and be forgotten." She turned to me then, eyes glassy. "Well, Edna, we didn't forget." The room stood, all of them, clapping, crying, some whistling, some dabbing their eyes. Even the mayor was there, holding a plaque he clearly hadn't expected to hand to a woman in orthopedic shoes. I stood up slowly. Clara reached out and took my hand, guiding me to the front. I didn't say anything fancy, just, "Thank you, this means more than I can say." But it wasn't about the speech. It was about the silence that followed. The kind that wraps around your ribs and tells you, you were never crazy. You were just unappreciated by the wrong people. And just past the rows of smiling faces, half hidden near the exit door, I saw her, Lindsay, wearing sunglasses indoors again. Alone. Not a bridesmaid in sight. Not a ring on her finger. Just a daughter, watching a mother be celebrated by people who never once called her food prison food. She didn't clap. She didn't come up afterward. She just watched. And that was enough. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel vengeance. I felt seen. For the first time in years. Not through the lens of what I could give, but for what I already was. And honey, let me tell you, that's better than any bouquet tossed into the crowd.